This story begins with our protagonist Hiraku Mashio, who wakes up surprised because for the first time in a long time he has managed to have a dream. However, without giving it much thought. The thing is that he woke up. In his huge home, his maid, who has a small horn on her face, apologizes to him for not having prepared breakfast yet, to which Hiraku calms her down by telling her not to worry because he has gotten up earlier than usual, and takes advantage of the conversation to shyly ask her not to call him master anymore, as it makes him feel uncomfortable. Later, Hiraku keeps wandering around the house when a noise in the kitchen catches his attention and he goes there. Once in the kitchen, he finds that his maid has found a kind of monster, something slimy and small, inside a vase, and between apologies the girl prepares to eliminate it with her fire powers. Once outside, Hiraku greets two of his friends who, before the worried face of our protagonist, ask him what is going on. Then the boy begins to narrate his dream, stating that he does not believe it is a dream, but memories of his past. But before he can continue, he is interrupted by some children playing there. Hiraku is lost from the conversation and stays watching the life in that place, the different magical races of the country life and the children playing in the plantations, and happily realizes that his previous self would never have imagined being able to witness such a cozy life. Later it is revealed to us in a memory where before going to that cozy place he had a conversation with the god of that world, a faceless golden entity. In this conversation the god tells our protagonist that he has finally passed away at the age of 39 years after years and years of hardship and betrayed by others. In collapsing after a terminal illness, his life has ended in a hospital ward. Seeing all the obstacles and the pains he has had to go through, the god gives our prota another chance to live a better life by giving him a healthy body free of any illness. This he does as he feels guilty, this god. This is because this god feels guilty, as he then reveals that all the hardships that our prota went through are due to a mistake of the god himself, and now with this new opportunity of life he tries to apologize. Without understanding much of everything that is happening, our prota accepts the words of the god and asks him to have a life in which he can devote himself to agriculture in a place away from civilization. The god, surprised by the request, tells him that agriculture is out of his jurisdiction, but that he can give him that life. After a call to Hiraku, his wish is granted and he is given what he wants, in addition to the power omnipotent agricultural tool, sending him immediately after to his new life. After all this, still within the memory, our prota wakes up in a forest with a new and healthy body that can move after years of being prostrate on the hospital gurney. The first objective that is proposed in this new place is to understand the reality in which he finds himself, and the first thing he notices is that he has a villager's outfit, that he is in a forest all alone, and that his body is young and strong, far from the age and physical build he had in his previous life. Without knowing how to start, Hiraku, he remembers that he has been granted the power of the omnipotent agricultural tool. Already at the moment he remembers that in his hand appears a gardening hoe. Then he proposes to use it and realizes that he must have some magical force, because no matter how much he uses it and how much force he performs, he does not manage to get tired at all. However, he stops his planting plans because he realizes that before starting to work he must get water and food to survive, so he goes to explore the forest. The exploration does not go very well because he does not find edible herbs, but it starts to get worse when he hears noise. He sees fleeting movements in the forest which generates some fear to the boy, who would not know how to defend himself if he encounters something. Hurrying a little step, he finds a giant tree that can be observed almost from anywhere in the forest, and it is then that he decides to use it as a base, as it is a good reference point. Once decided the place where he will settle, Hiraku sets out to look for materials to start his base. After wandering around with no luck, he decides to dig his own well using a technique he already knew. He takes some branches and moves them until he finds the perfect place to dig. When he has already decided where he will make the well, he uses again his power of the agricultural tool, and a shovel appears in his hand, demonstrating that the power granted will be able to provide him with any tool necessary for his work, as long as it is not too big. After hours of digging and digging, Hiraku finally manages to find a well of water, thus ensuring a source of water to survive. However, he is not so lucky with food. After searching for a long time, he does not find anything edible, but he does not worry because he does not seem to be hungry, which he attributes to his power of the agricultural tool. Later, he cut a tree in half with total ease because the power he was given is stronger than he thought, and takes advantage of the wood of the tree to start rebuilding his own hut. After a long time, he notices that the sun is hiding and decides to take refuge under the tree, using a magnifying glass to create fire and stay lit and protected. And at night, the boy notes that the new world where he is has 2 moons, which makes him realize that indeed he is in a completely different world than the one he knew. Little by little, with his knowledge and with the power that he has been given, Hiraku begins to weed the place. He even builds his own kitchen utensils. While he is at it, a terrifying rabbit runs towards him to attack him, but Hiraku manages to react in time, and with the tail of the scythe hits the rabbit in the head, finishing with his head. With a little guilt but with no other option, our prota uses the meat of the rabbit to make his first meal in that world, and later, Hiraku manages to give a large portion of land but goes to bed thoughtful because he does not know how he can start his garden if he has no seeds to plant. To his surprise, the next day he sees small sprouts throughout the garden. He fails to understand if it is his power, or is that in that world plants grow without seeds. Without giving many turns to the subject, our prota decides to defend his plantation of rabbits and other monsters that may head to attack. After several days, he realizes that there are many rabbits that attack him directly. But it is not something that bothers him, because all his food so far comes from these fights. Quickly, the boy manages to build a small hut for shelter. At the same time, he takes care of his crops that are edible. Just when he began to be calm, he meets two giant dogs that were watching him but without intention to attack. Seeing this, Hiraku allows them to pass to his fort and feeds them because they are hurt. However, they do not manage to finish the food because one of the dogs seems to go into labor. Hiraku leaves them in a safe place and goes to sleep to find the next day that the puppies had already been born and the dog family has decided to stay and live in that place. After a few days, Hiraku manages to harvest their crops that fortunately are edible and varied, while the dogs guard the place and hunt and take meat to the house, all as a team. Now we see the god who has granted a second life to our protagonist, who reveals that he has broken the rules by interfering. However, he continues to do so because the guilt for having given a life of hardship to Hiraku does not leave him in peace. But this god, who makes more mistakes than any human, manages to notice several days after the conversation with our protagonist that he has sent Hiraku to a very dangerous forest full of giant monsters, the so-called Forest of Death. When he wants to interfere again to get the boy out, he realizes that he can no longer do it because he has broken too many rules lately. And the only hope he has left is to wait for Hiraku to come back as a soul and accept the apologies of the god again. For his part, our prota feels proud and happy of the great knowledge of his vegetable garden despite the small mistakes he has made, and that serve him as new knowledge for his future plantations. After so much cultivating, Hiraku realizes that with his power of the agricultural tool he can get the crop he wants as long as he thinks specifically of a vegetable. When he plows the earth like this to corroborate his theory, Hiraku thinks of soybeans in his plantation and manages to see that the next day a small soybean sprout appears. Despite his efforts, Hiraku is aware that his success with agriculture is due to the gods who have given him that power, so he decides to create some statues of the gods as a form of gratitude. In the meantime, he tries new plantations and plays with the dogs and is grateful that they accompany him. Otherwise, the loneliness would have become unbearable. However, while he is petting one of them, he notices that it has a horn in the middle of his forehead, and although that is strange to him, he calms down, saying that after all he is in another world and maybe there that is normal. Little by little, with the help of the dogs, Hiraku begins to find new sources of water and food, and begins to develop planting or irrigation strategies that will help him to facilitate the crops, in addition to achieving greater comfort in their daily lives. In this way, begins to build roads and wide varieties of crops to generate not only fruits and vegetables, but also oils and flowers. Step by step, the country life that our protagonist wanted is becoming increasingly civilized. One day, the warm climate of the place begins to change and the cold becomes a complicated temperature for Hiraku, who only has the clothes with which she was brought to that world. Thinking that the cold would worsen, tries to use the skins of the rabbits eliminated. But he leaves that idea aside when he notices that they have a horrible smell that would probably get worse over time. When he intends to keep warm only with bonfires, one of the dogs brings Hiraku a spider bigger than him, that in a jiffy, and with its 8 legs manages to generate a very soft cloth scarf. After this demonstration, the spider begins to generate and provide clothes to our protagonist in exchange for potatoes from his garden. Thus Hiraku, in addition to solving the issue of cold, manages to get sheets, pillows, and curtains, making the cabin a more civilized place. When the snow finally arrives, our prota is comfortable in his cabin because he has previously organized everything necessary to spend a cozy winter. Despite the new life he leads, Hiraku begins to feel lonely because although he has his animals, he misses talking to someone. In the same way, he begins to miss some things from his previous life, like salt. Some time later, when the winter is over and is again part of the day-to-day, the little puppies that are no longer so small leave, and appear a few days later with new doggy couples. In the same way, the spider comes out of hibernation and appears with a new group of baby spiders. Little by little they are all forming their families, which means new mouths to feed. When Hiraku is working to generate more food, the alarm sounds warning of new dangers, and one of the dogs guides Hiraku to the forest. There he finds a little girl with few clothes that is crying in the middle of the forest. When our protagonist approaches to protect the girl, she rushes to him and bites him in the neck. Immediately after, her body changes and not only becomes a young adult, but also now she is dressed. Hiraku is surprised as he does not understand what is happening. And then one of the dogs hits the woman who attacked his master, and this young woman turns back into a little girl. Seeing her weakened, our prota approaches to talk to her. Then she tells that their encounter was a complex coincidence, and that the reason why she sucked his blood, biting him, was to regain her own strength as she used too much energy on the way, and that did not allow her to keep her body to normal. Seeing the girl weakened and feeling guilt for the beating her dogs gave her, Hiraku allows her to drink some more of his blood as no change or weakness is felt. When that happens later, our boy takes the girl to his vegetable garden and she looks impressed as she never saw so many crops together, nor tasted the vegetables. Then Hiraku shows her one by one his vegetables, and the girl praises him for the great job, which makes our boy happy. Already at night in the hut with the vampire girl, which we now know is called Lulasi, he is writing on a kind of magical tablet the new knowledge he acquired that day. Hiraku observes and without big surprises assumes that it is normal that there is magic in that world. It was then revealed to us that the vampire is looking for new medicinal plants, and that the reason why they are in that forest is that she had a fight with some nobles who were trying to steal her research. When she wanted to flee, some thugs began to chase her, so she decided to hide in the forest. While the girl tells her story, she reveals to Hiraku the reality of how dangerous that forest is. Our prota does not understand what the girl is telling him, because what she says are beasts for him are his puppies and his spider, and what she considers a great magic for him is normal, because in that world he was born with the power of the agricultural tool. It is there where we realize that our prota is very broken and powerful. Without understanding anything of what the girl says, Hiraku interrupts her to ask her to live there with him. Lulasi is surprised with the request because her condition of persecuted vampire makes her a dangerous being. But for Hiraku this is not important, because she knows that she will not support the loneliness for a long time. Although the intentions of the boy were innocent because he only wanted to convince with another person, she takes the request as a proposal of courtship, and after a misunderstanding and many embarrassments both agree to live together, assuming that from now on they will be as a couple. The next day Lu asks Hiraku if they could now grow medicinal herbs, to which our prota happily agrees. But later we see that a girl is investigating and asking about the Forest of Death, but we'll see what happens. And already the next day Hiraku happy of the presence of Lu, not only for the company but because he has helped her in countless areas, generating light with magic, helping to find the salt she wanted so much. Both are enjoying the peaceful life, with new future goals such as getting other types of tea. The spiders ring the bell again, warning something strange. Hiraku worries a little, who is not used to things happening to interrupt his peace again. They run to the forest to meet the blonde girl we saw before. The situation was exactly the same as the time our protagonist found Lu, because the girl was now trapped in the same tree. Once he frees her, the girl used a great magical power to return to decent conditions. When Lu observes this, he tries to leave, but the girl starts yelling at her as she seems to know her and scolds her, telling her to stop hiding and get caught. Hearing this, the wolves attack the blonde girl, but Hiraku stops them. Later in the hut, the three boys are talking, and the blonde-haired girl asks her why out of so many places to hide she had chosen that dangerous one. After finding out that Lu went through exactly the same experience when she arrived in the forest, it is revealed that it is difficult to face the wolves even if they don't look like it, and they also dodge the spells. Blushing, Lu tells the girl that Hiraku is her husband. Then the girl introduces herself as Tia, an angel, a rarity of warriors that according to Lu have more muscles than brains. Obviating the aggressive comments between the two, Hiraku asks why Tia is chasing Lu. Then she comments that there is a big reward for finding the vampire, since before she left town she generated a ruckus and great damage everywhere. Lu tells that she was a victim of a nobleman who forced him to make medicines and drugs, and when the man started with the demands she decided to teach him a lesson. However, Tia interrupted her to tell her that she has an explosive personality, and every time she doesn't like something, she explodes everything in the air. After a long fight, Lu admits that maybe she was out of line with the nobleman, and that she actually escaped to the forest because she was running away from Tia. The angel is surprised by the change of attitude of Lu because she had never before admitted any of her mistakes, and the girls begin to get along better. Then Lu offers Tia to live together in the small village of Hiraku. To convince Tia to accept, Lu begins to show her the crops and tell her about all the work they do in that place. When our protagonist tells her that it would really help, Tia is surprised because she does not seem to have many intentions of getting her hands dirty with dirt. However, they end up convincing her, who helps with the harvest, then tastes part of the crops and realizes that the fresh vegetables are much richer than the ones they have in the kingdom. And then she gets excited and the three boys spend all day cultivating the different plantations of the orchard. In the evening, Tia agrees that the agricultural work is more fun than she expected and that she loves the taste of the plantations of that orchard. When she hears that Hiraku forces her to stay and live there, because she admits that her body would not resist all that work alone. Finally, she seems to accept the proposal and begins her new agricultural life in which she not only helps to cultivate and harvest, but also uses her magic to create better irrigation and cultivation systems. Despite this, Hiraku admits that he is using all his energies, so it would be impossible to enlarge the huertas. While they talk about these problems, more puppies of their dogs appear. So the family is incredibly big, and then the boys decide to expand the place of the dogs and build a new hut next to the orchard. Later, Tia comments that she will leave for a few hours and flies away, but returns soon after with a team of female elves who decide to live in the village of our prota. Tia comments that the girls decide to live there because they have a sad past. They all lived a village far to the north, but most of them were destroyed and many of them were annihilated after being forced to participate in a human war. Since then, their race dispersed and began to wander the land looking for a new place to settle, a new place to be. They have no chance to continue to reproduce their race, and after telling their sad story and promising to work hard in the orchard, Hiraku agrees that the girls move in to live with them. With this new population, the village was small, so they all decide to build a new hut for the elves to live. Fortunately, the girls have a great knowledge about wood construction, so in 10 days they manage to build a huge and beautiful hut. A little envious by the performance of the girls and the difference between their hut and his, he decides that now he will also rebuild his hut because he has learned the technique of the elves. Later, the elves show that they are indeed very hard workers and that they feel comfortable and happy in their new home. He discovered that the image he had of the elves was very wrong, because the elves use fire and also consume meat, contrary to what our protagonist thought. As a form of gratitude for letting them live in the village, the elves propose him to do some mining work and also blacksmithing for him. So they build a furnace that allows to melt iron, and taking things from nature, they create a giant blacksmith workshop. Little by little, the village begins to civilize, and the wooden elements that our boy used to cook are replaced by real iron cooking elements. Later, when they learn that they have a wheat field, one of the elves proposes to make bread, and they all start a baking process, cooking large quantities of bread. When Hiraku asks if those lands belong to someone, Lu answers him that it is probably a plot, and that it does not belong to anyone, but that the forest is under the control of the Demon King. This scares Hiraku, but Lulu reassures him by saying that if he did not receive any help in building the village, and if everything he built was on his own, then the land belongs to him. In the evening, the girls talk about Hiraku's great achievements and how good he is at building and farming, but are surprised at how little knowledge the boy has about the world around him. When he intends to start farming, the spider interrupts him to show him that he has captured a giant queen bee. When asked what he would do with it, the spider replies that he wants to keep it as a pet. This seems dangerous to him, but he ends up reaching an agreement and a good relationship with the queen bee. Finally, Hiraku builds a room for the bees to make their honeycomb there, and in 10 days they manage to assemble the hive, and in turn for the bees to make honey, Hiraku plants flowers near the hive. Later, our prota finally begins to build a dam to have his own lake near the village, drawing water from a river that is somewhat far from the place. However, he has been so busy with everything going on that he hasn't managed to make much progress. One of the elves approaches the boy to help him, and between the two of them they come to the conclusion that the best material to make the aqueduct is a form of brick, which Hiraku builds with the all-powerful agricultural tool. Later, he starts mass production and quickly among all those in the village. But above all, with the strength and hard work of the elves, they manage to build the aqueduct. In this way, they will no longer have to go in and out of the well, but simply walking a few steps, they have a huge dam of water that will not run out while the river exists. In addition to facilitating crops, this new construction brought fish to the village, so it will no longer be necessary to marry rabbits. However, while Hiraku is wandering in these thoughts, a giant fish appears and attacks him. but our prota manages to react in time and kills him quickly. Later the boy cooks the giant fish, and all the girls are scared and wonder if it is safe to eat a fish from the forest of death. But he doesn't even notice this because he tries a bite of his food and in fact he looks happy, since the taste is very similar to salmon. Now all of them see that eating it doesn't hurt, and they try his dish and are delighted with the taste. So from that moment on, fishing would be one more of their daily chores. Now it is another day, and seeing that with the new construction rice plants are growing, Hiraku proposes to create a rice field, which he carries out by himself because he knows the proper techniques to grow rice. However, towards the end he asks the girls to help him plant. Little by little he teaches his neighbors the different techniques and processes of cultivation, information that he has acquired by watching television programs in his previous life. And this leaves the girls impressed because our protagonist is an inexhaustible source of knowledge. After going through all the stages of planting, harvesting, and separation of grains, he begins to prepare the rice and ends up preparing to eat rice balls. Seeing all the effort and steps involved, the boys find it too much work. But when they finally taste the rice balls, they are ecstatic with their taste. Seeing that all the girls can clean themselves with magic, Hiraku begins to miss bathing with hot water, so she sets out to create her own bath. So she manages to build a bathing space for the whole village of great size, and with different areas to be in the bathtub, wash, dry, and dress. However, he is concerned about returning the wastewater from the bath to the river. So Auntie proposes using elf slimes, as these feed on waste products and also dead organic matter, and well, those things are basically natural cleaning machines. Hearing this, the boy gets scared because again he has wrong ideas and believes that the slimes are dangerous monsters that can end the life of the adventurers. But Tia assures him that it is not so. She herself sets out to find slimes to finish the construction of the bathroom. Quickly the girl gets a lot of slime, so the issue of sewage is resolved. Later Hiraku sets out to cut wood to prepare the fire and heat the water for the baths. But in that moment he finds that one of the woods contains mushrooms. Not knowing which of all the mushrooms are edible, he decides to plant all the species he finds to start comparing them until he finds one that can be eaten. Later our prota teaches the girls one by one the steps to bathe correctly. When they finally enter the bathtub, Hiraku relaxes. Incredibly, he remembers that a long time ago he could not take a bath in a place like this, because not even when he was hospitalized they let him bathe. Then the boy observes that his way of planting mushrooms worked because different varieties had grown in that place, and proposes to make a mushroom stew. Before getting down to work he is interrupted by the dogs, because they have found 5 more elves who want to join the village, who accepts them to live in the village. He proposes not only to build a new house for them, but to enlarge the one that is already built. Also excited, all the elves of the village maintain an optimistic position about starting to make babies to increase the population. While observing this situation, Kiru, one of the dogs, remembers that since he was born he lived all his life in the forest, and planned to spend hunting until he met a female. Then he decided to form a family. However, not a fighting bear left them all wounded until Hiraku found them and saved them. Surprised, he states that he never thought that a human so weak could survive there. But he made it, and Kiru and his family accepted him as their master and took a liking to him. However, they later reveal that he and all his breed of dogs are the terrifying monsters known as Los Lobos del Infierno. But he is thankful that fate has crossed him with our prota,